Welcome to Done Pretending, the podcast where healing meets authentic living. I am your host, Susan Houston, storyteller, mentor, and believer in the power of truth to set us free. This is your sanctuary for the soul, a safe space where we peel back the layers of judgment and fear to uncover the beauty of living real. Each week, you'll hear stories of courage, resilience, and transformation that remind you it's never too late to become who you were created to be. Welcome back to Done Pretending. I am Susan Houston, your host, and I am so happy to have my guest here with me. She has blown my mind in the conversations that we've had about our relationships with money. Her name's Jennifer Edwards, and she it really dives into that money is a relationship that is no different from any other relationship. And we're going to talk to her to gain the insight and guidance to understand what's going on, our financial habits, and how we treat money. She's helped over 600 individuals and couples transform their relationship with money. And she's also the creator of the 7-layer financial wellness framework. So welcome, Jennifer. I'm so happy to have you.
Hi, Susan. I'm really glad to be here with you today.
You know, I was just sharing with you, money is one of those things that I don't take it for granted, but I like to say that I don't run my life about. I'm not obsessed by it, and it doesn't motivate me. But I can tell you that just recently, someone asked me a question of what is holding you back in your financial success? And I said, I think I'm good. You know, I tend to live with a generous spirit. And he said, no, there's something there. And I was just sharing with you that he uncovered some things from my past that I had no idea really affected how I do everything these days. You know, my past, like I told you, was my father was a compulsive gambler. Much like an alcoholic, his vice was money and gambling, usually the ponies. And we often lived through him gambling absolutely everything away, my mom hiding money. And this was when I was little, you know, my early years. So thank you for talking to us about that. I have a feeling that many of our friends on here, many of my listeners experience the same thing. So
yeah,
what is your take on all of that?
So often, because we don't know how to do it. If I was able to instigate a public service campaign, it would be, your money problems are not about money, and they're not about willpower, and they're not about discipline, and most of the time they're not even about knowledge. There might be a few times when it's like, oh, I don't know how credit scores work, or I don't know what a healthy debt ratio is, or what should I be saving, or how should I be investing. But most of the time, those answers are pretty readily available, and yet we still have a hard time actually following through with the necessary behaviors. So I would be saying, there's a lot more to that. And until you actually uncover and vet the money beliefs that you came out of childhood into adulthood with, unless you actually explored them and said, oh yeah, this is a healthy belief I want to keep, and this is an unhealthy belief that's limiting my progress, you're probably still very much being guided by those. And your poor little immature brain was trying to make sense out of the things that, the caregivers in your adult world were not explaining to you. A, money is taboo. B, even if it wasn't taboo, we don't yet have the language for it. So, one of the courses that I teach and that I help people with is in their parenting, so that they can talk to children about money in a different way. And because we were all not talked to about it right. You know what I mean? Nobody said, when I'm doing this, this is what it means. Or even just asking you, hey, when I hand the store clerk this little plastic card, what do you think is going on?
Yeah.
You just like exploring those. Well, all you have to do is get these little plastic cards, and you hear kids say this all the time. The mom will say, or the dad will say, we can't afford that right now. And then they'll go and they'll get their wallet and they'll pull out this little plastic card and they say, just give them this, and you can have whatever you want, right? So,
Yeah.
those imprints of those beliefs that we just formed them, just as best we could. Um, they're guiding our every action.
So, and this is something that I'm just realizing now about
Mm-hmm.
myself. How do you think that is guiding my actions now?
Yeah.
Obviously, I have an unhealthy relationship because of my dad's gambling.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think it's holding me back?
So the first thing well, I would have you go through my Financial Wellness Essentials five class course. And that is where we really uncover, we do the 7 layers. So we address all of the shame that you were
Mhm.
probably carrying some measure of shame about the secrecy or about the legacy of financial irresponsibility and wanting to distance yourself from that could be in there. And then just the sense that maybe you can't trust the people, that some maybe just around the corner, something might not be what you want it to be or might not be stable.
Mhm.
So in that class, we talk about the way that our body responds to trauma. So we'd explore that, and I'd say, do you normally manifest in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response? And usually that manifests in the way that you react with money. That's a pretty good guide. Either, if you're a fighter, you might get to where you're like too controlling about money. That's really kind of how that shows up. Or
Mhm.
if you are somebody who is a flight person, then you avoid the problem through activity. So that
Mhm.
could be workaholism or constantly checking, news cycles and investment portfolios and performance and things like that to try to keep from actually feeling the thing, avoiding through action. Then there's the freeze response, which I don't think is you, which is the shutdown response. So that's avoiding through inaction.
Yeah.
You see
Yeah.
people who just can't deal with the money at all. It overwhelms the nervous system. And then the fawn response is where uh, we try to soothe those feelings through connection. So
Mhm.
we might this is where you see a lot of women in fawn, especially those that don't have their own income sources or don't have so they're placating or they're appeasing, they're making sure that somebody else is being taken care of because that's the roundabout way for them to get taken care of. So we would explore all that. I wouldn't be able to say until we said, like, what is it looking like in your finances? And usually I can tell by looking at a person's cash flow, like what's coming in and what's coming out, and what
Mhm.
their net worth statement is compared to like their life station. So if they're in their 40s, 50s, 30s, or whatever, and I can see what's going on with their net worth, I can usually pinpoint some of those patterns just from seeing what the numbers are saying. Like, if there's kind of chaos in there, credit card debt that can't be explained by a specific event or, something like that, just
Mhm.
kind of overspending. A lot of times those things show up as just, you could be dopamine seeking just to eliminate the pain. That's part of the response sometimes too. So
I think
yeah,
that that one for women probably is pretty common, right? The
yeah.
dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know for me that doom scroll at night, and the thing pops up through Facebook, Instagram, email, wherever. And, oh, I do need more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Mm-hmm.
and so I've instituted a rule for myself that um, even when shopping for clothes or different things, if I see something, I make myself wait till the next morning to hit buy.
Bye. Yeah.
And that has stopped a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
because
You're
things will show up at my door and I will half remember ordering them, which
right.
is
It wasn't important to you,
no. I
important
mean, how
enough.
many of
Yeah,
us have things in our closet that,
absolutely.
still have tags on them or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it
You're
looked good at the moment.
sure. And I bet your dad was dopamine seeking too.
Mm,
Can you tell me
because of the gambling.
what
Mhm.
kind of work did he do?
He was a mechanic, auto mechanic.
Did he ever talk about, his dreams? Like, I always wanted to be a race car driver, or I always wanted to be an artist, or I was going to go to college, but my family didn't have money. Like, did he ever say anything like that?
Uh, Never to me as a
Mm-hmm.
child. My dad was not the best person to be around all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about a little bit on the podcast. He was, I would say, verbally abusive, a little physical abusive with my mom. And so I had a very tainted view of him from the time that I was little, did not care for him
Yeah,
at all, and resented him. And I
sure.
think resented the position that he put my mom and I in financially a
Sure.
lot. But yeah, he was, he never talked about anything like that.
Yeah. That was pretty typical of that generation to
Hmm.
just kind of suffer in silence, but that it always explodes somewhere.
Hmm.
Especially when we feel a lot of times we'll say it's a lack of control, but I call it a lack of agency because most of us don't really have a lot of control over our, there's not actually a whole lot of control, but agency is our choice. And he probably felt a lack of choice, and
Hmm.
and in feeling that, the sad thing is that the people that are around us are the ones that we're going to they're going to feel the brunt of that because they're just proximity is they're the ones that are there. He probably couldn't explode at his boss. He probably felt like he couldn't do that, but he could explode at someone that was more vulnerable and wasn't going to fight back and was probably just incapable of stopping that from happening, which would have been, your mom, especially back in those days where that
Yeah.
was a little more common. So, one of the
Interesting.
big things that happens a lot of times in my work with people is this moment where we first diminish the shame around ourselves and we ask, like, where did this shame come from? And it's usually a prior generation of like, oh yeah, this is coming from someplace else. It's not really um, inside of me, or because of my lack of willpower, because these were all things that we inherited from a time when we didn't know better. We couldn't
Right.
have known better. And then, so first that shame and you could call it forgiveness, but I usually say you really don't have much to forgive yourself for. But yeah, just like releasing that, and then it's kind of a cool thing to see it extend to people around us. We learn about the stress cycle and how trauma gets trapped in the body, and oftentimes people will say, "I get why my parents are the way they are."
Mm.
And then they go, and that's why they taught me or treated me the way that they did. And then we can even go back because we do a financial family genogram, and we can go back to the grandparent generation and go, oh yeah, all of the things that they were facing would have affected the way my parents thought about and saw money and saw themselves. And then that would have affected the way that they saw me. So this is why I feel like this work is so important, is because if you can crack open that egg and you can say, hey, we're going to stop now. I love working with young couples, especially as they're just starting before they have time to really mess up their kids, which they're all going to get messed up anyway. In fact, we
Oh
know
yeah.
that good parenting really only has to take place 30% of the time to actually produce a functional adult. So you don't have to be a great parent. You just have to be not a horrible one.
Wow, I
And
hadn't heard that statistic. Wow.
yeah, it's kind of an amazing thing how resilient children are. We really shouldn't
Mm.
be shielding them from the idea. It's a lot of apologizing. It's a lot of, hey, mommy got upset about this or such, and that's not on you. I'm going to try to do better next time. This kind of treatment of you is not okay. Like letting
Mm.
people know that, that's the kind of thing that says it's not okay for me to yell at you. It's not okay for you to yell at others, or whatever the action is. So when we can kind of crack open that egg and break that cycle, and when we have adult children and older parents,
Mhm.
to be involved in that process of healing those relationships where, you may have a this is stereotypical. I don't like to promote stereotypes, but of course, the generation that we're talking about would have probably followed this pattern a little bit more closely. Now we have dual income earner households as the norm, but in the
Mhm.
past, it was typically a male income earner, and to actually build a lot of wealth usually meant that they were in, that they had their own business and probably a blue collar manufacturing type of a thing that they built from the ground up. And it required them to be either gone physically a lot, or even when they were home, kind of not there in presence, not really emotionally there. And of course, they didn't have the skills because we didn't have the internet back then to even tell us, like, this is how you should be treating your children and the kinds of needs that they have for you. And so there's sometimes this identity that that primary business developer has around, like, I'm keeping them from suffering the way that I suffered. Maybe if they had scarcity in growing up, and then they were like, I'm going to make sure my children don't suffer like this. And
Mhm.
so they were gone all the time, and they built all this money, and they made sure that there was no housing insecurity, no food insecurity, that they had vacations, and they had, possessions and these material things. And then the child says, I don't really actually want all that. I want your time. And so, but the parent thought that they were doing the right thing by keeping them from this other kind of suffering. So being part of that healing process is just really magical to see people say, oh, I get why you did. You felt so insecure, like you'd gone without dinner, maybe you'd had to live with family members for periods of time because your family couldn't afford the rent or the heat or something. And so, of course, that was going to be like your entire focus for your adult life. And that was equated with love for them.
Mhm.
And then to
That is
have
exactly right.
yeah, and then to have the adult children say, I understand that. Um, and then for there to be healing because the parent then goes, I can see how I didn't, because I wasn't dealing with my internal issue. The problem with a scarcity mentality is that no amount of money is going to satiate that until you heal what's broken inside, that
Well,
unmet
and
need.
speaking of this scarcity, um, my mom lived through uh, the beginnings of World War II. She was born in 1934. She's still with me. She's still 91.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but she can remember the rationing, and she
Mm-hmm.
can remember only having beans and growing their own, or raising their own chickens, growing their
Chickens
own food. Yes, and
and
have
no
so she,
waste.
no waste, no.
Right.
And she will tell you to this day she'd much prefer to eat anything other than chicken because she was the plucker. She had to pluck off
Ah,
the feathers
yes.
for many
Right.
years.
Right.
So I know that I have recognized is
Mm-hmm.
that she does have that scarcity mentality. And when I tell her that I'm doing things, I took a trip to London, and she's like, why do you think you need to travel everywhere?
Right.
So,
It feels wasteful to her. It's
yes,
because, especially when
yes.
it was ingrained in her before. Now we know that our financial belief system is in place between ages 7 and 10.
Interesting. Okay.
Before we hardly even have any experience with money, we've already got our narrative built around it. And
Hmm.
so for her, it was, waste equals suffering. It's probably
Yes.
something around there. And so she sees like this extravagance. It looks like an extravagance, a wasteful extravagance on your part. And she wants to keep you from the suffering that she believes that will lead to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have learned to just redirect her.
Hmm.
I've stopped explaining myself because she's 91 at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
So
Probably not going to change a whole lot about that, but we can definitely change it for you.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Understanding where she
So
came from.
what do you think this money mindset? I can't even say it, money mindset
Hmm.
shift or issue. Do you think it's more of a mindset shift or do you think it's an identity shift?
Well, so your belief is you have certain beliefs about the world and you have certain beliefs about yourself.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that identity piece is the beliefs about yourself and what you deserve,
Yeah.
what you're worth, what kind of treatment and respect you are due. So when you have a money belief that is I am statement, then
Mm.
that is part of your identity. And the money mindset includes those identity parts.
Mhm.
But it can include things that are not about you. It can include things like, and then it would translate into stuff. So let's say the money mindset of rich people or wealthy people are greedy.
Mm.
Greedy, and maybe you had a parent who worked for a big corporation and you heard them complaining all the time. Corporate wants us to work longer hours and they're going to cut our pay, and sorry kids, I was going to take you on a vacation, but then corporate is making me la da 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 da, right? So you formed this image about wealthy corporations and corporate things, like meaning, picking on the little guy. And so you've just kind of decided that you might actually avoid building wealth. So
Mm.
the identity part of that could be, I never want to be a wealthy person. And you might not consciously, you probably don't consciously know this, but because you think wealthy and greedy equals mean or bad, you're going to say, that's not me. And in order to confirm that reality, you're talking before we started about frequencies and things. You might not want to live in that abundance frequency because you actually associate it with being a bad person.
That's interesting. What came to my mind was I know so many young people, and I'll say in their 20s,
Mm-hmm.
who really do have that view about being wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
They truly believe that any wealth that we have is meant to be shared. And I tend to lean on a very generous
Mm-hmm.
side, but theirs is almost to the point they would rather not build their wealth. And I can think of an instance. I was talking to a young person about real estate and how that can be a great way to build your assets
In
over
fact, it's
time.
very hard to become independently wealthy without owning your home.
It is, it is. But they truly believed that it could serve a purpose, but they would rather not do that because they felt they could use their money better elsewhere.
Like a down payment, like putting the down payment,
Yes,
or just.
anything,
Mhm.
or even the, and I tried to turn it around and say, okay, but if you own your own home and you hang on to it, you're going to build equity. And then you can take that money and do more with it than just not investing it in anything. It will grow exponentially if you do this. And it was very difficult to get them over that hump of belief.
So in those circumstances, because I've seen this as well, we don't start with, this is why my 7 layers, this is where it comes in, is you were attacking it very logically from the knowledge perspective. And this is what financial advisors do. In my previous work, in the financial planning world, we would try to show people, like, you don't want to move your money around, or these are the investments you want to have, with all of these spreadsheets and this, a computer program that would say, this is what's going to happen long term if you make this little tweak or this little tweak or whatever. But
Mhm.
then when the market would have a downturn, everybody's calling their advisor like a chicken with their head cut off, just going, what's happening? What's happening? And you've given them the knowledge, you've given them the information, you've shown them the projections. And yet that emotional reaction is still there because the belief is still guiding the way that they think about it.
Mhm.
So, in the case of a young person who's saying, yeah, I don't want to have anything to do with real estate, once we understand, like, okay, owning your own home, at least your primary residence, is in fact, I mean, Could you become financially independent without it? Yes. It's much more difficult. And there's a reason why the government has incentivized home ownership. It actually leads to better citizenship. So, it makes you feel more stable. It makes you feel more connected. It makes you feel part of a community, like you own, a part of this thing, and now you're invested, invested emotionally as well as invested financially, right? So,
Yeah.
I would say it's better to attack where does this come from, help them see that, and then say, now, if you knew that the people who are going to be able to make a big difference in the world and have the impact that you're telling me, I know that this younger generation, that's so important to them.
Right.
They're not willing to just be wealthy at any cost. They have to know that they're doing worthwhile, meaningful things for people and
Hmm.
for the planet and for the next generation, which is so ennobling, to have that be their focus. But if they are held back from wanting to actually build a financial security because of those beliefs, then they're never going to be able to make that impact.
And that goes right along with a lot of the training that I do for business leaders, because what I have noticed, and I witnessed this in the corporate CPA office that I was at, the highly qualified people that we wanted to attract to work for us needed to know that we were not there just to build the business, just to expand it. We were going to make an impact with it. And I can remember every year at our beginning quarterly meeting, we would announce goals.
Mm-hmm.
And, but we had to say, okay, here's our goal. If we can meet this, that means not only will we all be able to rise a little, but we'll be able to bring someone else in who then we can start building up. And we can take this percentage of it and do this in the community, or
Mm-hmm.
offer this service
Mm-hmm.
at no charge, or do this. And that is how we were able to attract really highly qualified younger people
Mm-hmm.
who would possibly take the jobs that we offered with a competitive salary, but maybe it wasn't the best. But
Mm-hmm.
we offered them the work life balance that they were just learning about because they were newly married or newly new parents. And we were willing to make an impact with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
So,
that is something that this generation and millennials really kind of started kicking the ball down the court on that, saying,
mhm,
okay, what where I work is, and what they call the work life. It's not just the balance, but um, that community culture, right?
mhm,
The culture there is as important as the salary. That when you come home,
yes,
and maybe this is kind of where your parents and your grandparents' generation, they didn't feel like they had that. And I know that as human beings, we want to know we've done something really meaningful with our life. And if especially in the time of war, that feels like that's being taken away, it
mhm,
leads to all kinds of internal cognitive dissonance, and then that leads to wanting to escape from that pain. And then our culture is the first to raise its hand and go, you don't like pain, let's escape from pain with some consuming something, right? And
yes,
uh, which is
yes.
so readily accessible that, yeah, it's probably we're gonna find something that will then create more problems down the road.
Yes, it does. So, do you think that someone can build genuine wealth without first doing the inner work?
Oh, for sure, you can
Mm,
build wealth. The thing that yeah, people are building wealth right and left because they're still acting on those beliefs of wealth is going to fill my need,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right? So yeah, we have lots of that because we got that whole message in our society about how, we see it on TV and everybody thinks, oh, that's the be all end all right there, is having the money. But
right.
that it can't be everything. There's suicide and addiction and divorce and estrangement from children and parents, and criminal activity. I mean, is still in the wealthy class of society. They have just as many messes as those who are of lower means, financial means. So that's obviously not the key to happiness, the keys
Right.
of the kingdom, right? So that's where I'm saying, let's make sure that we're building wealth from this place of self-love instead of from this place of
Mm.
shame.
I love that. We talk a lot on this podcast about taking off the mask of
Yes.
shame, the mask of pretending that everything's okay. And what I often see regarding wealth is a pretending that everything is okay. And then my closest friends, though, if someone were to look at them, they would say, oh, they've really got it together. They own their own home. They've got decent cars. It doesn't have to be the newest or the best or anything like that. But there, you dig a little bit deeper and there's a lot of stress around it. And I'm sure you deal with that too. The stress of, am I going to have enough? I'm sure you heard that a lot as a
Hmm.
financial planner as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and the interesting thing is that once you have some, you always grow into, it's what we call the hedonic treadmill, or yeah, we always grow into with new desires. In
Hmm.
fact, they say if you're anticipating, you don't even need to have gotten the raise yet. If you anticipate a 1% raise, your desires to increase your standard of living go up by 2%.
Interesting. So we're always outpacing.
We're always outpacing. So getting to that place of actually feeling like I have enough. So we can start with describing the life that you want and then work
Mm.
backwards from there and say, this is the amount of money that it would take to have that. And then, but see, that's never going to work fully unless we have actually dealt with, like, are you going to trust this number? When we say we have that number, that this is the net worth that we need to sustain that lifestyle till your expected life expectancy and beyond, because no financial plan is like, okay, you're going to die with $0 in the bank, because we know exactly when you're going to pass away.
Right.
it's
Right.
always it's always got an extra buffer in there. But
Hmm.
because that feeling isn't there, that feeling of like it, and I like to say, if you're not happy with $5,000 in the bank, you're not going to be happy with 50,000. And if you're not happy with 50,000, you're not going to be okay with 500,000. There is a poverty line, and it's kind of nebulous a little bit, defined by the person, but that line where you again feel like you don't have the agency over your choices. That's really why there is a happiness jump when you get to the point where you have some choices. Because
Hmm.
when you're at a certain level of poverty and all of your choices are made for you, then yeah, you you're that's not going to be okay with you. You're going to be in a constant state of stress over that. Even if
Hmm.
you're, this is what, I mean, slavery was all about this. There was a
Mm.
story about a slave who went to a judge. He had escaped and came, and he was picked up and he came back, and the judge said, didn't your owner treat you well? And he said, yes. Didn't they give you 3 square meals a day? Yes. Didn't they give you a safe place to live? Yes. Were you beaten? Did he take away your family, or, any of the, and he said no. And he said, so I don't understand, why you would want to leave. And he said to the judge, I'm happy to trade positions with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The
It's
freedom.
that
Hmm.
it's that sense of agency over the
Yeah.
course of our lives. So we want it more than we want comfort, and we want it more than we want
Mm.
even predictability. We do want predictability for sure, but we would rather have the stress of not knowing everything that's going to happen than not having the choices over our lives. So, uh,
Mm.
yeah, the stress is there. That's one of the things that I try to help people get to the point where it's like, let's if you because I've seen this and it's so sad. They've got millions of dollars in the bank and they're just stressed out about, like, oh, what if my returns go down by 2% this year? And you're just like, you've got enough money in the bank that you should be able to let all of that stuff go and just enjoy your family, the end of your life, all of these things that you said you worked toward.
Yeah.
And until we deal with those internal things and we actually expose them and go, oh, this is still hampering my ability to feel, I just call it unease, right? You
Mm-hmm.
might feel this
Mm-hmm.
like, constant, you're calling your financial advisor too often. You're, looking at the numbers too frequently. And when I work with people who, in my presentations, I have people raise their hands and I say, who here has a financial hangup? And I show a list of them, like, spend too much, or have a feeling like they don't want to spend money, like they feel uncomfortable spending money at all. So they're oversavers. You can be an oversaver. You can be an overspender. Gambling, shopping would be on that list. Constantly checking accounts, changing your investments based on the news is on there.
Mm.
Because if you're doing that, I would call that speculation. Or so when I've got people like your dad when he was gambling, I would say that somebody who is day trading or like moving money around in the short term, or if they have a Robinhood account and Robinhood will send them a push notification, hey, this stock looks like it's really taking off. You might want to get in before it gets too high. I
Right.
say that money that you are spending on that stock needs to be put into your entertainment budget.
Mm-hmm.
That is not
Oh,
your
interesting.
investing
Okay.
budget. You're fine to do that as long as you have money for that to be your entertainment. If you're saying that's, to me, that's no different than going to the movies, or, going to a Comic-Con, or, whatever you want to do for fun. That's your fun. It is not investing.
Because you're expecting it to hit, and then you get that joy or dopamine hit from that.
You're
Is that
actually
why?
getting you're actually getting the dopamine hit from the anticipation of it
Mm,
possibly, like, basically, of getting something for nothing. It's the same dopamine hit that comes to slot players or pony betters.
yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's that's interesting. I It makes me wonder too, like I like all those things that you mentioned, I wouldn't say that I really have a hang up or any of those. Maybe the shopping. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of that is boredom, but
Hmm.
I tend to just trust that the money's going to be there. And
Hmm.
it always has been.
Hmm.
It's always worked out. But I know that that also isn't necessarily financially responsible either.
Well, the fact that you are telling me that you have a little bit of discomfort around it tells me we should work on it. I
Yeah.
mean, if
Yeah.
you're not uncomfortable about it, then you know that this is where I was going with this. Was I have everybody raise their hands if they have one, and then I say, and for those of you who didn't raise your hand, if I asked your spouse or your closest, the person in your sphere that's the closest to you, if they would identify any of these on your behalf, how many of them would say, yes, I
Mm,
do? And so it may be affecting your relationship in ways that you're not acknowledging, or a person is not acknowledging, because they might say, hey, I'm really good with money. I go to work at this time, I come home at this time, my family's all happy. And then you pool the family, and they're like, yeah, well,
yeah.
no, we're not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Jennifer, I cannot wait to dig into this more with you on a personal level. Um, so when all is said and done,
Hmm.
what do you want people to say how your work has helped them?
Um,
What's your purpose now?
yeah.
Because obviously you were a successful financial planner, and now you've jumped over to this side,
Hmm.
which I think is huge
Hmm.
and something that's not talked about enough. What do you
Yeah.
want to accomplish with it?
It would mostly be that, because here's what people see at the end of their lives. I've done a lot of reading on the research that's done for people who are on very old in their lives and maybe have a terminal illness. They see the end is near, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what they are looking back at their lives and saying is important. And one of
Hmm.
the number one things that comes up across the board is, I wish I had lived according to the things that were important to me instead of being pulled by, society's expectations or this family member's expectations or my boss or, what other people thought I should be valuing. So that's what
Right.
I want for people is I want them to get to that point. I was even, thinking about how it might be around the idea of regretting less, like having
Mm,
less regret, looking back at the last 10 years and going, yikes, I got a lot of things I wish were different. And then the next 10 years after they work with me and going, I don't have that. Yeah, I might not have made the perfect, like I say, a perfect decision does not always lead to a perfect outcome, but you
mm,
can still have peace in that decision. You can still say, for instance, people who, were maybe on the fence about buying a house in 2021 and then 2022 when the interest rate shot up, they went, oh, shoot, I should have bought in 2021. But if we looked
right.
at their numbers and they weren't financially ready, I would say that's not a bad decision. We can still mourn the effect of that decision was, okay, maybe you're going to have to wait a little bit longer now because the environment changed, but you could not have known that. And that's not that's not your fault that happened. You still made the right decision. You weren't financially prepared to own a home. And so you can't, I would just try to help people live in that space where it's like, I'm working with some people and they're planning weddings and stuff, and it's like family
Mm,
members have all kinds of ideas about what the right way to go about this is. But when I talk to the couple and they're like, when it's just the two of us and we're talking about what we want this day to look like and this event to look like and how much we want to spend on it, we're comfortable. And it's only when we start bringing in these other people's ideas that we start to get crazy. I'm like, this is what we need to focus on is get you back into that space,
yeah.
set some clear boundaries, and then say, yeah, because it's like it's alignment, right? Here is where I
Yes.
want to be and here is where I am.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
looking back after, and saying, hey, I get why I did that, or I'm now gonna not be so worried about, pleasing this segment of society or living according to this segment's standards. I think when we let our true self, like that kind of higher self, guiding self, bubble up and lead our lives, it's just so much more peaceful and satisfying.
It is. And not just around financially, but our whole lives. And that's something that I've been really trying to lean into this last year is um, it- I've been pushing away everyone else's expectations and
Hmm.
really just trying to trust in what the purpose that God has given me.
Hmm.
And when I know when I'm really aligned with it, because I do settle into it and
Hmm.
things come easily and it's peaceful. And
Hmm.
then, not to say that there aren't issues, not to say that there aren't problems, but um, it's easier to look at it through a clearer
Hmm.
lens to
Yeah.
solve the problem.
Yeah. And nobody gets a problem-free life. No,
Oh
and
gosh,
I
no.
would never say this, there are some people out there in the financial wellness space, and their promise is that they're going to eliminate financial stress.
Mm,
And I'm kind of saying that, but I'm mostly saying we're going to try to eliminate the regret. Like when
mm,
a stressor comes, we want to be able to attack it from that place of clarity and then say this is just a situation that we have to face. This is and those are always going to arise. One of my catchphrases if it's not this, it's going to be something else. Like you're always going to have
yeah,
something, right? So if it's not, a family member with cancer, then it'd be,
mm,
a rebellious teenager. And if it's not a rebellious teenager, it'd be a financial, issue like maybe losing your job. Or if it's not losing your job, it's going to be the car breaking down. If it's not your car
yeah,
breaking down, it's going to be something. And so the idea is to recognize. I teach about the wave-like nature of the universe, which you talked about earlier in frequencies. Of course,
yeah,
frequencies is just about how far apart the waves are and how high from trough to peak they are. But everything goes from a kind of a homeostatic place to a peak and then back down, then to a
mhm,
homeostatic place, then to a peak, and then home back down. And so when we recognize that that's just part of life, like don't live in expectation of always being in homeostasis or almost always being in balance, and always like there will be an up and then there will be a counteracting down, and that's where balance comes in.
I
Where we get
love
in
that.
when we get into
That is so
trouble
important.
when we get into trouble is when we have an up and then we don't want the down, or when we have a down and we don't realize that that's going to be followed by an up, right?
Mm,
Like when we just get stuck in thinking this is where I'm always going to be, is on one of these two. And
mm.
that's not a place of peace.
No, and I think that's such an important reminder is that we are on a wavelength, um, and it is always changing. So I think that so many people that I talk to are truly trying to find their peace, find their acceptance of themselves. And what I have to remind them is one, our brains love patterns, they love pattern recognition. So the doubts or the problems are always going to happen. But it doesn't mean that it has to control you,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Or
okay,
define
this
you.
happened. Or yes, exactly. Exactly. Oh, Jennifer, this has been absolutely amazing. And I truly say that I can't wait to work with you. Um,
I'm really excited about that prospect.
oh, yes. All of your contact information is in the show notes. And guess, friends, I really encourage you to take a look at Jennifer's website, all of her videos, everything that she's done, because you give so much information um, on all of that. The deep dive that we're going to do is amazing. But I think people can learn a lot just by looking at everything that you have. Where would you recommend people start?
Just my website. You can
Yeah.
just easily click on the I do a 20-minute free call with absolutely anybody, because what you're going through, as long as the first thing that you need to know is that somebody cares about it and
Yeah.
acknowledges that it's important that you get through it. So sometimes that means we'll continue working together. Sometimes that means I point you to another direction, another resource.
Hmm.
If it's something else that needs to happen before we work together, but usually we have some place we can start making some progress on that right away.
That's fabulous. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much. And I can't wait to talk to you more.
It's great. Thanks for having me, Susan.
Thank you for joining me on Done Pretending, where healing meets authentic living. If today's conversation moved you, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't yet, be sure to follow the show and leave a review. Your words help this message reach more hearts around the world. Remember, you are seen, you are loved, and your story has the power to set others free.